I used to work in a context surrounded by conflict. I now get to work with some of the coolest all remote and virtual teams on the planet. And so in this video, we're gonna unpack how to manage conflict in virtual teams. Let's get into it. So that context where I was surrounded by conflict was working with an organization called World in Conversation, and their entire mission was to bring people together in conversation, groups of 8 to 12 people, strangers usually, to talk about really soft, fluffy topics like race relations, long-term conflict, gender, sexuality, politics, religion, etc., for 90 minutes with the sole purpose of skipping headlines and gaining a better understanding of the other. And so through that work, I actually, when I left that job, so I used to train facilitators to do that and now also lead conversations myself. And in every conversation, I saved a green sheet. It was an 8.5 by 11 little piece of paper, and with each of the participants' names. And I saved every single one of these sheets. And at the end of that job, I went through and added up and tallied how many conversations I had led. And it was over 500 conversations with about 10 unique individuals in every single one, which is about 5,000 people sharing their stories and opinions and conflicts for 90 minutes. And so holy smokes, I learned a lot from that. My co-founder, that's where I actually met my co-founder and partner, Will Wise. And from that work, we created and developed this Ask Powerful Questions pyramid. It's the structure of our book, Ask Powerful Questions, Create Conversations That Matter. So in this video, I'm gonna go through this pyramid in hyperspeed and share a tool or a lesson that you can immediately steal and apply to managing the current conflicts that may be brewing or going on in your virtual teams. If you have any questions that weren't answered in this video, drop your question in the comments below. I spend a good bit of time answering comments and being in conversation. I would love to meet you there. So the first level of the pyramid that we're gonna unpack is intention. And specifically, it's really important, and this is kind of a preventative measure, but it's also can be used in the midst of conflict. But the intention that I would invite you to have as a team is to actually encourage conflict, not combat. Let's unpack that a tiny bit. Hey Siri, what is the definition of conflict?
As a noun, it means a serious disagreement or argument, typically a protracted one.
A serious disagreement or argument. I would say that, I wouldn't say. A whole bunch of creativity and innovation researchers would also say that disagreement is essential. You need to have a diverse set of perspectives in order to create things that are valuable to everyone. And so disagreement, conflict is really, really good. Now, on the other hand, hey Siri, what is the definition of combat?
As a noun, it means fighting between armed forces.
Fighting between armed forces. Okay, so this is really intriguing. If you think about your team and what it means to be armed, right? Your intention is to harm the other. Whereas I would say if your intention is to encourage conflict and disagreement, your intention can actually be to uplift people through that conflict, not to tear them down. Combat harms others. Conflict promotes good discussion and higher level thinking and critical thought and creativity and innovation. So your first lesson is to encourage conflict, not combat. And maybe a way to do that is by distinguishing between the two, right? Actually having a conversation, and you might actually at a team meeting have a breakout discussion or have a team discussion around what is the difference between conflict and combat, and have people look up their own definitions and talk about it and unpack it and come to an agreement of how you collectively want to actually manage conflict and what you want to do to avoid combat, right? I don't want to avoid conflict, but you do want to avoid combat. That is not productive. Second level of the pyramid, rapport, connects to this phrase, I see you. So if the intention was, I'm willing to know you, the second level is, I see you. And I'm gonna pull from my own marriage, and you might have received this advice too. I'm definitely not the only one that has heard this or passed this around, but this idea in a relationship with a significant other of never go to bed angry. And I think at the heart of that idea of never go to bed angry is saying, hey, I am willing to hear and see your side of things. I want to see you rather than just go to bed angry about whatever that is. And so for me, managing conflict in virtual teams, I would say never continue angry. It's really easy for like some small stupid little thing to create some rift, and then time passes and the stories around that idea, that rift, get bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually it becomes awkward for two people to talk, or it becomes combative for two people to engage with each other rather than being able to be in open conflict and open dialogue with each other. So how do you manage conflict in virtual teams? Never continue angry, right? And the solution, or the way out, the path out of anger, I believe, in a workplace context, is curiosity. If you can shift your brain from a mindset of knowing, right? I know this happened. I know you are like this. I know you did this, and I'm angry about it. If you can shift that mindset to, I don't know everything about you. I'm recognizing I'm angry, but I'm willing in this moment to be curious and seek some understanding before I seek to be understood. Because as soon as we start to seek to be understood, we start to get a little bit combative. And going back to that round one of the intention being conflict is okay, combat not so much, you start to backtrack there. Tier 3, level 3? 3. Openness. This is the idea twofold. One, entering into conversation and dialogue and conflict with an open mind. And then in the book, we also talk about literally asking open-ended questions that begin with how or what rather than why questions, which tend to encourage some level of judgment. Not so good for managing conflict in a virtual team, especially in a virtual team. And yet it's really easy. So if you're communicating on Slack back and forth, or email, or there's feedback going back and forth, and look to see if there are any questions that begin with the word why. Because as soon as somebody asks a question that begins with the word why, it has judgment embedded in it, and it's asking that other person to justify a decision. And so when you can reframe those questions as how or what, that's really useful. Now, a really concrete example of this on a bigger scale in an all virtual team. So Buffer, if you're familiar with the company, pre-pandemic was like kind of one of the companies that all other companies look to in terms of how to do remote well. They are super transparent. They post a blog about how things are going. Their entire team of about 100 employees, at least at the time that I connected with them, about 100 employees scattered across the entire earth. To build this openness into a part of their culture, they actually used WeConnect cards and a handful of other tools to create Water Cooler Wednesdays. Every Wednesday, they had this remote time, and this was pre-COVID, before remote was popular. And so they would get together and they would choose a question or a series of questions and invite people to come into conversation to connect personally. And this is super, super important. It's not that they got together on Wednesdays to manage conflict. It was this preemptive thing where they actually got together and to connect on a personal level to each other. I don't know if Buffer knows this, but there's a decade of educational psychology research and organizational development research that says when we increase the amount of personal information that we know about each other, it creates communication shortcuts. And those communication shortcuts come in really, really handy when you're trying to manage conflict, right? So building that level of trust and rapport so there's a solid foundation, right? My wife and I are able to be in some pretty intense conflict at a totally conversational, chill level where we know and understand that our intention is to have a long-lasting, healthy relationship. Because, in part, we know so much about each other, right? She knows so much about who I am, off camera and on camera, that we just have that level of rapport. And openness is part of what creates that relationship of trust with each other. And so inviting you to maybe carve out time, Water Cooler Wednesdays, pick a question of the day or a question of the week to unpack and share. There is a link in the description to a bunch of free questions that we researched that are specifically catered to accelerating the process that trust and connection is built. If you want to just dive right in, you've already got some rapport built for your team, start off with this one. What is an idea you strongly believe in? Just get people's beliefs out on the table, because it actually can create, in a safe context, a petri dish of conflict. Right, so you might even talk about you watched this video once, it was articulating the difference between conflict and combat. And I just want to unpack are differences in the community? What's an idea that you strongly believe in that you think other people might not agree with? And actually invite some of that conflict in a controlled, healthy manner. Just to share one positive, fun anecdote, I have two neighbors down the street and they share a driveway. And one had Trump signs in their lawn and one had Biden signs in their lawn. Conflict, potentially combat, I don't know. In the driveway though, was this phrase or arrows pointing to both signs that says, don't worry, we're still friends. And I love the concept. I love the idea that we can actually be, conflict is not about reaching an agreement. Conflict is actually about understanding the other and being okay not reaching an agreement sometimes, right? Consensus is about reaching an agreement, but conflict is just about having differing opinions and still loving each other anyway, still being okay with it anyway. Level number 4, listening. There are lots of ways we unpack this, 4 different levels of listening. What I want to give you right now is the lesson or the tool to, as a virtual team, increase the bandwidth. If you're managing virtual conflict via text message, maybe do text with emojis, right? So let's just go through a few levels here. Text with emojis, maybe Slack, a little bit more synchronous, maybe audio messages, bump it up one more from that, you can hear people's voice. Then you're getting on a phone call, then you're hopping on Zoom, then you're showing up outside somebody's house and throwing a rock at their window, right? If communication is not working at any of those levels, increase the bandwidth, jump it up one level. Don't try to just continue the text fight or the email fight. And as a leader and educator, I believe your job or your role is to take the first step. So to say, hey, I feel like we could probably go back and forth with 8,200 emails and maybe not still fully understand each other. Can we just book in a time, 30 minutes, and our sole intention is to understand each other a little bit better and move forward even if we still disagree, right? Like that's a cool intention to hop on a 20-minute call for, and it increases the bandwidth in a way that you're gonna communicate 10 times more in that 20 minutes than you will over 200 minutes of emailing back and forth or Slack raging. Last level, but not least, certainly not least, is empathy. And this is the idea, the tool here is to describe the world as they see it, as somebody else sees it. The really practical question that I'm gonna give you to help empathize, because I think in a virtual context, empathy is actually merging worlds or merging contexts. Right? Because when you click a Zoom link, just because you teleport into the same virtual room, it's still a different temperature. You still have different family members and friends and roommates and chaos and dogs and backgrounds and habits and time zones. Everything is different except for the Zoom link you clicked on. And so I believe you've got to do something in the first 5 minutes of every meeting to help merge context a little bit. And a question I recently came across from Bob Tiede, who's the author of this book right here. He shared in an article recently this beautiful question, which was, what's behind your door? When you're working as a virtual team or in a remote context, what would it look like to start off a meeting by just unpacking what's behind that door? Or what's behind that wall or that window or whatever else. And you can do that from a very literal level, like my dog is sleeping on the couch on the other side of that wall. Or you can do that at a little bit of a deeper level, like level 2 or level 3, which is what kind of baggage are you carrying into this meeting, or what mindset are you bringing into this meeting is maybe a better way to phrase it. But the idea is you're doing something in the first 5 minutes just to merge context. And when you merge context, you create empathy. And empathy is really good at taking combat and turning it into lovely, healthy, and productive conflict. If you're like, oh my gosh, please video don't end, you should check out this video on how to have difficult conversations at work. I'm Chad Littlefield, lovely hanging out in cyberspace. Have an awesome day.